Hey guys, hope you're doing well. In this week's compilation, we have the best teams for Legends Arceus. So we got Hisui and Samurott, Typhlosion, and Decidueye all in one video back to back. As usual, timestamps for each team will be in the description, and I will be back to making new content on the weekend after New Year's. Enjoy, guys! So the moves we've got on our Samurott today are Ceaseless Edge, Aqua Tail, Mega Horn, and Poison Jab. So, Ceaseless Edge is this new great signature move Samurott has, with 65 base power and 90 accuracy. It causes some decent damage, while also hurting the opponent afterward with residual damage for a few turns. If you're not huge on Ceaseless Edge though, go with Night Slash. It's another dark type move that Samurott will learn upon evolving, and it's even stronger with better accuracy, but minus the residual damage that wins me over. Aqua Tail is the best water move that Samurott has physically, but since it could be a mixed attacker, feel free to use Hydro Pump later on when Samurott hits level 43. Then we've got Mega Horn, which is a tutor move, and will be great to deal some major bug type damage. I'd say the other dark types of the world need to fear Samurott big time. Finally, Poison Jab sets out the rest, offering a way to handle fairy types, which is probably the scariest weakness Samurott has. Psycho Cut and Ice Beam are some fine alternate moves, and can really play out well even with the rest of the team, which, spoiler alert, has Ice and Psychic coverage already. So that's all, and because I'm doing things a little differently with this best team, we're just going to get into the next Pokemon and talk about the battles later. So next up on the team, we have got the wonderful Roserade, a favorite of mine to use in Sinnoh back once again as a favorite for Hisui. Roserade's strength is unmatched among most grass types you can reasonably find and use in this game, but it is still only available in the Crimson Mirelands, leaving the beginning portion of the game without a grass type. Why not grab a Shinx then, and possibly use that in a Luxio until you can grab Budew? You'll want something for water types that might get in your way in the wild, and of course it's a pretty decent Pokemon to use early anyway. Its strong physical moves can outbreak through Gumi and Mai too, and that's definitely important. So when you eventually get Budew, it'll need to love you a bit and be leveled up into Roselia. And then for Roserade, you'll have to get a shiny stone. You'll have to spend some time nabbing MP and trading for one probably. But maybe you'll find one laying around somewhere after you get Ursaluna, or perhaps in a time-space distortion. It's all up to you and how you get Roserade. But for now, let's take a look at its move pool. We've got Sludge Bomb, Energy Ball, Dazzling Gleam, and Shadow Ball, comprising the move pool on Roserade. They're all very easy moves to get on Roserade using the move tutoring. Sludge Bomb and Energy Ball are a duo of very nice stab moves, and Petal Dance can even be learned at level 52, so a pretty massive grass type move in the late game can make an appearance. Dazzling Gleam and Shadow Ball provide some good coverage too. And did I mention this fantastic fact? All four of these moves can be put on your Budew by tutoring, so this little bud is bringing the smoke from the moment you get it. Those are the moves you want on a Roserade, no doubt about it. So we'll just move on to the next Pokemon on the team. Let's go with the best Hisuian form out there, the incomparable Goodra up next. You'll have to find Gumi in the Crimson Highlands. And guess what? Despite what some people tried to tell me in my Hisuian form ranking video, you don't need Basculegion to get it. I'll throw it up on screen, but there is a way to use Whirldeer to leap across the water and swim to the area where Gumi is. So it's still a relatively early encounter, and you don't just have to settle for Gumi either. There is an Alpha Sliggoo right around these Gumi. So while you probably won't be able to use a level 50 Pokemon in that moment, it is sort of a cheat code to get Goodra right away. It's got some insane stats from 150 special defense to 110 special attack and 100 in both physical attacks. This is a pseudo-legendary if I've ever seen one, and its new Steel Dragon typing is so very good, with just weaknesses to ground and fighting types it must worry about. Even then though, with the investment of proper EVs and whatnot, Goodra can take some major hits even from its weaknesses. Its moves are even nicer, so let's take a look at those. Goodra's got Iron Head, Dragon Pulse, Ice Beam, and Rock Slide. There are plenty of moves in the pool for Goodra that you could rotate out Ice Beam and Rock Slide for, like the Elemental Punches, Sludge Bomb, hell, even Water Pulse. Its Iron Head and Dragon Pulse both hit pretty well, since this thing is a mixed attacker, and for being stab moves, it doesn't get too much better.
Then, with Ice Beam and Rock Slide, well, those two serve as coverage against miscellaneous Pokemon. While Ice Beam is able to handle the ground types that take aim at Goodra, it is unfortunately unable to pull anything out of its move pool for fighting types, except maybe Shelter. That's right, a defense boosting move that makes Goodra harder to hit just might be its best response to fighting types. And one I'm willing to endorse if you're alright with not running a fully offensive-oriented set in a playthrough. That's it for Goodra though. This awesome Hisuian form brings a ton of strength and next-level utility, and it isn't even that hard to get or all that late. Alright, so next up, starting off our second half of the team, is a Pokemon that I couldn't imagine not using. You'll need Basculegion to get to it out on Ramanas Island, but it's worth the wait. The great and beloved Infernape is punching its way from modern Sinnoh to ancient Hisui, and making another best team appearance. You can snag a really strong Alpha Infernape, or just catch a Chimchar and build that starter in your image. Either way, it's up to you. It brings much needed fire and fighting coverage, and there's not a lot of better Pokemon than it, quite frankly. Though I will say I really like Hisui and Arcanine as well. It's a harder Pokemon to get because you need the Firestone, but even then, I still think that Infernape is better. And if you're looking for firepower before then though, there is a pretty cool Ponyta you can get through a request in the early parts of the game that can fill the Fire Void. And it's a really cool coloration of it too. But how about them moves on our Monkey Pal? Let's take a look at them. We're going ape here with Flamethrower, Close Combat, Thunder Punch, and Drain Punch. So why did I go 2 fighting type moves? Because it made me comfortable to have Close Combat as a big nuclear bomb sort of move that lowers defenses, while also using Drain Punch as a move that can be used more often in a longer battle. Plus, I mean, come on, do you know how long I've waited to see Infernape get access to Drain Punch? It's been like my #1 move to see it learn. It and Close Combat work as a team with Flamethrower being a superb fire type move, and Thunder Punch provides needed water coverage just in case your Infernape finds itself needing to battle a strong water or flying type. There are other moves though it can use if maybe you're not entirely comfortable with 2 fighting type moves yourselves. Like for instance, Shadow Claw is a great coverage option for psychic types, and Stone Edge can take care of flying types as well. There's a few ways one could take Infernape, but I'm pretty happy with what I chose for it. Next up on the team, we've got Gardevoir, which I ended up deciding to use over Alakazam, because boy howdy, Gardevoir has got that coverage, man. Despite the fact that Game Freak righted a long-standing wrong in giving Infernape access to Drain Punch, they still haven't pulled the trigger and given Alakazam Thunderbolt, which was honestly a big part of my decision making. It's really easy to get Alakazam early on with Abra and Kadabra floating about in the Obsidian Highlands, so I'd suggest using it until you get to the Crimson Mirelands, where you'll get your hands on Ralts and begin the crawl to Guardy. Its 125 base special attack and 115 special defense is definitely very good, and its move pool as you're about to see is loaded. I like being able to pull in Guardy on yet another best team, even if it is at the expense of the great Alakazam. I can't ignore the quality of moves versus the power of Alakazam in this one though. The moves Gardevoir is using are Psychic, Moonblast, Thunderbolt, and Mystic Fire. Sorry, I mean Mystical Fire. Mystic Fire sounds cooler. There's that Thunderbolt I was talking about earlier. It's really worth using with the power behind Guardy. Psychic and Moonblast, of course, are a duo of great stab moves, and honestly, could be all you ever use with Guardy, and you'd be in great shape. Mystical Fire is a last little bit of coverage that is amazing to see in this pool, as I always felt a fire-type move was something Gardevoir was missing. There is so much in the move pool though for this Pokemon. We're talking Energy Ball, Ice Beam, and Shadow Ball. Yeah, it even gets Ice Beam now. If you want to set up Calm Mind, you're free to do that as well. There's a lot of great stuff in this pool, guys, and hopefully you guys understand why I went with Gardevoir over Alakazam at this point. So let's wrap up the team with our final member, the great and powerful Rhyperior. I had thought about a great defensive Pokemon here to match up alongside Goodra, and Rhyperior is perfect in that spot as a physically defensive partner to that specially defensive Goodra. Rhyperior rocks out with base 140 attack and 130 defense. And while it isn't speedy, it doesn't really have to be. Rhyhorn is available in the Crimson Mirelands like most of the team, so early enough into your adventure. If you want to use a rock type during the Obsidian Fieldlands portion of the game, there are a lot of Geodude rolling around that I could definitely suggest using until you've got Rhyhorn. You'll have to get a Protector one way or another to get Rhyperior. And of course, level 42 is when Rhyhorn evolves. But thankfully, it's such a good Pokemon in the grand scheme of things that waiting for Rhyperior to eventually come isn't a hassle. High horsepower, Stone Edge, Thunder Punch, and Shadow Claw are Rhyperior's moves. But trust me, this is by all means not the only moveset you could run. Just take a look at this pool up on screen. Everything from the elemental punches and fangs to Iron Head and even Mega Horn and Outrage. There is no wrong way to put Rhyperior together, as long as you're including Stone Edge and high horsepower so you can get the most out of its stab. The other two moves are your choice. That's what a lot of this best team has been. Your choice when it comes to moves, because the way this team can be customized is just major. The defensive power of Rhyperior can't be understated, but neither can its incredible move pool. This could very well be the most important Pokemon on the team, depending on what you prioritize. I want to address one thing though before we move on, and I know this is going to be a trend in my comment section. I already feel it. What about Garchomp? I said it in BDSP, and I will say it again. By the time you get it, it is too late in game in my opinion. The evolution line can't be found until the Coronet Highlands, and to me, that's too late. I'm also aware of the Alpha Gabite you can catch that's level 56, so you would realistically have your Garchomp pretty quick if you did wait until the Coronet Highlands. I have to say though, a big thing that turns me off from Garchomp is its lack of a powerful ground type stab. It's lacking Earthquake, and Bulldoze is the best ground option it has. 60 base power on Garchomp is a sin, and it makes me a little upset that Bulldoze is the best it can get. Sure, it still gets Dragon Claw, but I think the majority of people use Garchomp because of its ground typing, and we already have a solid dragon typing with Goodra anyway. Also, Garchomp's move pool pales in comparison to Rhyperior's. And hang on, I'm not done yet, because now you're telling me you can get an Alpha Garchomp in the last area of the game. But at that point, is it really worth it? If you want to use Garchomp at the end of the day, that's your choice. It's still powerful nonetheless. So we've gone through the 6 Pokemon I've chosen to use mostly in this playthrough, while offering a few movesets for them. So what battles do you have to deal with? Well, I'll start by going through the nobles. The first one you have to deal with is Cleaver, and essentially your starter is all you'll need for this. Whether you have Dewott by this battle or not, the water type moves will help you chip away at Cleaver with ease, and get it quelled before long. Then we move on to Lilligant. Well, that's going to be easy as well. It's fighting grass type, so a flying type move will go a long way in hurting it, and giving you the opportunity to bomb the hell out of it. If you'll run Aerial Ace on Dewott, it's just going to be an easy go around. Speaking of things being easy, Samurott will help you take down Hisui and Arcanine in your next one too, as could Rhyhorn. Water ground type moves are what will do the work. Then Electrode, well, that's where Infernape can cause major damage with its Fire Stab. Electrode can definitely do some damage with electric moves, but the Fire Ape will have nothing to worry about should Electrode call upon its grass moves. Finally, in your battle with Avalugg, it's going to be done in by Infernape as well. But Rhyperior, Roserade, and Samurott all can handle this thing as well, even if there are some threats from ice moves and whatnot. There are going to be some trainer battles you need to worry about too. The opposite gender character from yourself, Volo, and Mai are all very easy early battles that you can push your way through if you use a combo of Oshawott and perhaps a Shinx like I mentioned prior. The battle with Leon before dealing with Cleaver involves having to beat Gumi, which is going to be a little bit of a pain for the Oshawott/Shinx conglomerate, but it's certainly possible. You've got battles scattered across Hisui with the Misfortune Sisters. And for the first one, you'll be able to pull out your Kirlia to pull down Coin's Toxicroak. Not long later, you'll need to beat the 3 of them in succession. And Gardevoir can pretty much handle all these battles itself. Pull out Psychic, Mystical Fire, and Ice Beam, and it's all but over. Their Pokemon wouldn't even be able to handle the power. It'll pretty much just be these same Pokemon, so you'll know Gardevoir can always handle these bandits. Ingo is a fun one, and it's another battle Gardevoir can pretty much handle on its own. Ice and Psychic is all you'll really need to book your ride on the Subway of Victory. You'll have some run-ins with Adaman and Irida with their Ice Grass evolutions, which Goodra could take care of depending on your moveset lineup. It's really quite easy. Let's talk about where it actually is a little difficult though. The battle with Benny's team is Mismagius, Sneasler, Gardevoir, and Gallade. A combined effort by Gardevoir and Samurott should be enough to handle him, which leads to a battle with Komodo. Infernape should be able to handle his Snorlax, while Roserade takes out Clefable and Golem. That'll leave Samurott to deal with the Psychic-type Braviary. After you get through that battle, you deal with Palkia and Dialga, and getting through them is definitely not as difficult as it might sound. Gardevoir or Infernape will do the job with fighting and fairy moves. So after that, you've beat the game. You can go do all the post-game stuff, and that leads to the single most difficult battle in this game. You'll end up fighting the, spoiler alert, actual villain of the game, the clear Cynthia ancestor, Volo. He pulls out an identical version of Cynthia's championship team, with the exception of Arcanine, which takes the place of Milotic, who isn't in the game. You'll want to turn to Goodra in this battle especially. Its great defenses and power will come through when you absolutely need to take hits. Togekiss gets dropped, Lucario can be taken out if you're feeling frisky, and Arcanine is easy to overcome. Then, for Roserade and Spiritomb, you can use Guardy. And for Garchomp, take your pick. Guardy or Goodra can handle it. You can use Rhyperior or Roserade too. It's all up to you with how you put your team together moveset-wise. Though, once you overcome Volo, you must defeat Giratina twice. And it is difficult. It might look simple enough to turn to Goodra or Gardevoir on this thing, but it'll hit you hard, and it'll take you out unless you're fully trained up values-wise. You're probably shrugging me off right now and furiously typing in the comments that you had no issues with Volo and Giratina. But save yourself the finger movements. Not everyone had an easy time, and plenty of people, after this video even goes up, will have a hard time still. That's it for the battles though. A handful of team members can handle the most important battles. I'd say Gardevoir is the MVP of the team, but Goodra could essentially do anything to anyone that it wants to, even if there's nothing super effective involved. As I'm only really suggesting you use 2 moves on your Typhlosion as definite needs. You should run Infernal Parade, which is a ghost type move with the chance to burn. And if you do happen to cause a burn, well, this cool new move doubles in power. Flamethrower can help cause a burn too, of course, and it's also the strongest special attacking fire type move that Typho has. Here's the issue. Typhlosion is very much a special attacker by a large margin, and unfortunately the coverage moves it has are all physical. You can settle for Thunder Punch, or Drain Punch, or Bulldoze. Any of those moves will help wrap up the moveset, but none of them are going to hit very hard due to the large discrepancy in the 2 attack stats. You're free to do as you please for the final 2 moves on this set, but if you only use Infernal Parade and Flamethrower, you'll be fine. So next up, we'll run through the 3 returning members from the original best team before getting to the final 2 new ones. We start with Gardevoir, who is pretty much the best Pokemon to use in a playthrough of this game, period, and will undoubtedly be popping back up on the Decidueye team. As I suggested prior, while you wait for Ralts, it's not a bad play to rock out with an Abra or Kadabra on your team. It'll really just hold that spot in the Obsidian Fieldlands, but by the time you're in the Crimson Mirelands, it's Ralt City. You'll get to Guardy after not too long, and then you'll have 125 base special attack and 115 base special defense, alongside a just next level elevated move pool that Legends Arceus got so right for this lady. Speaking of, let's get into that move pool. The moves Gardevoir is using are Psychic, Moonblast, Thunderbolt, and Ice Beam. So there's Thunderbolt, that all-important move that plays a part in making Gardevoir more attractive than Alakazam as a team member. Psychic and Moonblast, of course, are a duo of great stab moves, and honestly could be all you ever use with Guardy, and you'd be in great shape.
Ice Beam
is a last bit of coverage that is amazing to see in this pool, as I always felt a
Ice
type move was something Gardevoir was missing. There is so much in the move pool though for this lady. We're talking Energy Ball, Mystical Fire, and Shadow Ball. If you want to set up Calm Mind, you're free to do that as well. There's really a never-ending pool of dominating moves here, and it's really pushed Guardy past Alakazam in this game. The quality of Guardy's power definitely overcame the quantity of points in Alakazam's special attack. Roserade is coming up next on the team, bringing a third special attacking option to our very powerful Typhlosion team. Roserade's strength is unmatched among most grass types you can reasonably find and use in this game, but it is still only available in the Crimson Mirelands, leaving the beginning portion of the game without a grass type. I still maintain calling upon Shinx and Luxio to help you out prior to adding Ralts and Budew to your team, as it can really help you overcome the Obsidian Fieldlands. So when you eventually get Budew, it'll need to love you a bit and be leveled up into Roselia. Or you can just catch Roselia if you're lucky. And then, for a Roserade, you'll have to get a Shiny Stone. You'll have to spend some time nabbing MP and trading for one probably. But maybe you'll find one laying around somewhere after you get Ursaluna, or perhaps in a time-space distortion. It's not too hard to end up with Roserade, that's for sure. It should make total sense why I chose to bring it back for this team. We've got Sludge Bomb, Energy Ball, Dazzling Gleam, and Shadow Ball comprising the move pool on Roserade. They're all very easy moves to get on Roserade using the move tutoring. Sludge Bomb and Energy Ball are a duo of very nice stab moves, and Petal Dance can even be learned at level 52, so a pretty massive grass type move in the late game can make an appearance. Dazzling Gleam and Shadow Ball provide some good coverage too. And did I mention this fantastic fact? All four of these moves can be put on your Budew by tutoring. So, ending up with it instead of just getting Roselia isn't the most miserable thing by any means. So, we've got all this special power. I guess with the next Pokemon, we should get physical, right? So, let's bring in the final returning team member, the great and powerful Rhyperior. Its massive amount of coverage, combined with the crazy defense it has, it just made it the obvious choice to bring back for this team, even over Goodra. Rhyperior rocks out with base 140 attack and 130 defense, and while it isn't speedy, it doesn't really have to be. Rhyhorn is available in the Crimson Mirelands like most of the team, so early enough into your adventure. If you want to use a rock type during the Obsidian Fieldlands portion of the game, there are a lot of Geodude rolling around that I could definitely suggest using until you've got Rhyhorn. You'll have to get a Protector one way or another to get Rhyperior, and of course level 42 is when Rhyhorn evolves. But thankfully, it's such a good Pokemon in the grand scheme of things that waiting for Rhyperior to eventually come isn't that much of a detriment. High Horsepower, Stone Edge, Thunder Punch, and Shadow Claw are Rhyperior's moves once again, kinda just cementing that this is indeed a fantastic set. Just take a look at this pool up on screen. Everything from the elemental punches in Fangs to Ironhead, and even Megahorn and Outrage. There is really no wrong way to put Rhyperior together, as long as you're including Stone Edge and High Horsepower so you can get the most out of its stab. The other two moves are your choice, people. Perhaps with the next two Pokemon coming up, you'll want to change things around on your end. So, we've got Empoleon up next. It takes the place of Infernape, you could say, as we've lost Samurott and gained Typhlosion. Or we may as well flip things around here too. It's also why we don't have Goodra today, as I was able to mostly fill in any holes left behind it with Empoleon. It's easier to get and fits the team just as well with this build. But don't be surprised to see Goodra return for the Decidueye lineup. Anyway, you've got to wait for the Cobalt Coastlands to find a Piplup. It hangs out around the Spring Path, so Basculegion is a must to get it. But once there, you'll find it pretty easily and be able to add it to the team. If you're lucky, you might just find Prinplup bouncing around as well. I'm not really advocating for the usage of the Empoleon Alpha in that area, since it's such a high level. But if you're into that sort of thing, knock yourself out. Empoleon's 111 special attack and 101 special defense make it another special attacking Mon on this team, but it's really no problem. I think Rhyperior and the final Pokemon on our team, we sort of have enough physical attackers. Enough of that though, let's get into the moves. The moves Empoleon has are Flash Cannon, Hydro Pump, Water Pulse, and Ice Beam. Flash Cannon is a great stab on Empoleon, and in many ways, the only Steel type move worth using on it. I mean, who wants to actively use Steel Beam anyway? Then Hydro Pump and Water Pulse come together as two water options, one with power and the one with accuracy. Then Ice Beam is nice coverage to have on Empoleon. And it's also like the only other move worth using in its move pool. Empoleon is a nice fit-in for Goodra and brings potentially better water coverage than Samurott. I was happy to have it on the team. We'll wrap up the team with one last new member, the incomparable Crobat. As you can probably guess, Crobat means there is no fighting rep for this team. But that's alright. The fighting typing, while dominant, can be covered by other types in certain battles just as well. As for Crobat, Zubat is available in the Obsidian Fieldlands in random areas whether it's dark or not. And when it hits level 22, it evolves. And then to go from Golbat to Crobat, you just gotta show it love. Crobat is a very speedy boy with some decent enough attack stats that it sort of just fit in just fine with the rest of the team. I know you may be questioning why I chose to bring it on when we already had some poison type representation with Roserade, and it was mostly just because of the flying typing. And it's really good defensively. I feel like it's important to just get into the moves here, starting with Cross Poison, and then Air Slash, Leech Life, and finally Dark Pulse. Now, this is a mixed attacking set, and while Crobat isn't the best Pokemon you can march out as a mixed attacker, I think this actually works pretty well. Cross Poison and Leech Life are two very powerful physical moves that can handle Fairy type and Psychic type Pokemon. The latter being great considering Crobat's poison typing. Then with Air Slash and Dark Pulse, well, one is stab and one is coverage related. They're both special moves, though with Air Slash being a bit stronger than Aerial Ace, I think is a decent trade-off. It sucks they got rid of flinching, but what are you gonna do? Dark Pulse is nice since we don't have Samurott's dark typing on this team, and it can handle both ghosts and psychics if need be. So that's the team, and once again, we have to go over what we can cover with this squad. Again, I'll start by going through the nobles. The first one you have to deal with is Cleaver. And with Cleaver, it's not as easy as when you have Duat. It isn't as afraid of Quilava and can easily fight back against it. So this could be a battle where you rely less on actually battling with Pokemon and more so on your own ability to throw bombs. Then we move on to Lilligant, and of course with Crobat or Quilava, you'll handle this team with the utmost ease. When it comes to Arcanine, Empoleon or Rhyhorn will be an easy answer to that Fire-Rock type. Then Electrode, well, Typhlosion will make quick work of this demented Apricorn. Finally, in your battle with Avalugg, it's going to be done in by Typhlosion as well, really, with Rhyperior and Roserade providing backup much like they did with Infernape in the original best team. Let's not forget about the few trainer battles too. The opposite gender character from yourself, Volo, and Mai are all able to be put to bed by Cyndaquil and Zubat if you've got it on your team soon enough. The battle with Leon before dealing with Cleaver involves having to beat Gumi, which is still a little bit annoying no matter what you're bringing in to face him, but it'll be fine. You've got battles scattered across Hisui with the Misfortune Sisters, and for the first one, you'll be able to pull out your Kirlia to put down Coin's Toxicroak. Not long later, you'll need to beat the three of them in succession, and Gardevoir can pretty much handle all these battles herself. Pull out Psychic, Mystical Fire, and Ice Beam, and it's all but over. Their Pokemon wouldn't be able to handle the power. It'll pretty much just be the same Pokemon, so you'll know that Guardy can always handle these bandits. But there is support from the Crobat and Typhlosion too. Ingo is a fun one, and it's another battle Guardy can pretty much handle on her own. Ice and Psychic is all you'll really need to book your ride on the Subway of Victory. You'll have some run-ins with Adaman and Irida with their Ice Grass evolutions, which Typhlosion has wrapped up with its OG stab. Once again, Gardevoir is proving it's such a powerful and easy to count on Pokemon for this game's best teams. We move on now to the more challenging battles, starting with Benny. His team is Mismagius, Sneasler, Gardevoir, and Gallade. A combined effort by Gardevoir and Crobat should be able to handle this Wally ancestor, which then leads us right into Komodo. you're able to easily take on everything with the exception of Snorlax, unless you do a little moveset maneuvering, like running Rock Smash on Rhyperior. No matter what though, you'll have the kind moves necessary to knock out Snorlax, even if they're not for super effective damage. That'll leave Typhlosion to deal with the Psychic-type Braviary. After you get through that battle, you deal with Palkia and Dialga, and getting through them is definitely not as difficult as it might sound. Rhyperior and Gardevoir are all you'll really need for ground and fairy types. Then we move on to the difficult, and at times annoying, Volo fight. Once again, it's just a near-identical version of Cynthia's championship team, with the exception of Arcanine, which takes the place of Milotic, who isn't in the game. You'll want to turn to a trifecta of Gardevoir, Typhlosion, and Rhyperior for this one. Togekiss gets taken out with an Ice-type move, Lucario can get bopped by Typhlosion's fire moves, and Arcanine is easy to overcome by Rhyperior, much like earlier in the game. Then for Roserade and Spiritomb, you can use Guardy on her own, and for Garchomp too, of course. Then, once you overcome Volo, you must defeat Giratina twice, and it is difficult. It might look easy enough to just use Guardy on this thing, but it'll hit you hard, and it'll take you out unless you fully trained up values-wise. That's it for the battles though, after you overcome Volo and Giratina. Once again, I'm saying Gardevoir is the MVP of the team, with Typhlosion and Rhyperior taking on expanded roles with the team's composition. It's all around definitely not as good as the original best team, but still an absolute powerhouse, led by everyone's favorite waifu, Gardevoir. Well, that's it for another best team. I can see it now, you guys are really wanting to suggest something other than Crobat for this team, like Staraptor or something. Well, you know, maybe Staraptor is overrated a bit, and I felt Crobat could do a good enough job on its own. I bet you guys didn't think about that. Well, I certainly did. Though really, did you guys notice that Guardy, Typhlosion, and Rhyperior manage mostly everything on their own? I didn't even really need to talk about the other 3 Pokemon. This game is less about the sort of teams you put together and trot out, and more about the individual Pokemon for sure. That said, I do look forward to seeing the type of synergy I can create when putting together a team for Decidueye. For now though, that'll do it for this video. Decidueye's moveset it's using is Leaf Blade, Triple Arrows, Brave Bird, and Psycho Cut. Now, choosing Leaf Blade definitely made a lot of sense, as there just aren't any other physical grass-type moves in this thing's pool, with the exception of the Bush League, Leafage. It sucks that there isn't variety, but at the very least, Leaf Blade is a strong move anyway. So next up is its signature move, Triple Arrows. This new move is only 50 base power, but boosts Decidueye's critical hit ratio by 2 stages, which is big. It lowers the opposing Pokemon's defense by a stage too, pretty much making up for it only being a base 50 move. I think it's pretty great, and maybe the best move in the pool, honestly. As for Brave Bird, it's here for coverage, but it does cause recoil damage, so I'm not gonna blame you for wanting to stay away from it, whether that's by using Aerial Ace or no flying move at all. Then finally, Psycho Cut is here to take advantage of potential crit boosts with Leaf Blade, since it already has a relatively high crit ratio as well. This whole set sort of works through Triple Arrows, but that's not a bad thing by any means. Decidueye is a very strong lead for this team, but let's move on to the returning Pokemon. Our second Pokemon is making its 3rd appearance in the Legends Arceus series of best teams. That's right, we've got none other than Gardevoir. Since this is its 3rd time around the block, I don't think I need to go into too much detail here. It's got a slightly better move pool than Alakazam, which is the main reason it's being used over it, but feel free to use an Abra or Kadabra until you get a Ralts in the Crimson Mirelands. Once evolved into Guardy, you've got that nice 125 special attack and 115 special defense, with pretty decent everything else. So with that said, let's just hop into its moveset. The moves Gardevoir is using this time around are Psychic, Moonblast, Mystical Fire, and Ice Beam. Naturally, you gotta have Psychic and Moonblast for stab on this amazing Psychic Fairy type, so not much has to be said about that. Mystical Fire reappears, as we'll need that Fire type coverage considering the starter choice. Then finally, Ice Beam is returning from the Typhlosion team instead of Thunderbolt. Why is that, you ask? Well, an Ice move is definitely needed during this playthrough, and another powerful Pokemon will have Electric coverage later on, so it was a pretty easy choice to make. As always, if you don't particularly care for my coverage selection here, you can always go with Energy Ball, Shadow Ball, and even the likes of Calm Mind, to really give Guardy that extra boost it probably doesn't need. As I said, I tried to keep this section short as it really didn't need further explanation. Gardevoir is a monster, and is definitely a Pokemon worthy of making an appearance on every Legends Arceus best team. Making a return from the original best team, we've got Hisui and Goodra. I said not to be surprised during the Typhlosion team if Goodra were to make an appearance here, so I hope none of you were surprised. When you've got a typing like Steel and Dragon, base stats like 150 special defense, 110 special attack, and 100 in both attack and defense, you just can't go wrong. Once again, you don't need Basculegion to actually get a Gumi or Alpha Sligo in the Crimson Mirelands. Just Sequence Break with your Wardeer and you're good to go. On top of all that move pool is spicy, so let's take a look at what we can do with it. This week's Goodra is working with Iron Head, Dragon Pulse, Flamethrower, and Hydro Pump. As always, a lot of these coverage moves can always be swapped out for others when needed, or even if you just simply hate what I've put together. You've got Thunderbolt, Sludge Bomb, Steel Beam, Bulldoze, and the list goes on. Although Steel Beam has recoil, so do what you wish with that. However, Flamethrower and Hydro Pump do feel pretty important to me, as fire coverage is really good to have, as we aren't rocking either Fire Starter that can be found in the Hisui region, and the same applies for the water type. As you'll see later in the team, there are reasons why I didn't add either Infernape or Empoleon, leading more credence to why I've picked Goodra today. But even putting that point aside, Goodra is just plain good, so I don't really need a long explanation of why it should be used. So we can just move on to our last returning member here. Making its third appearance is none other than Rhyperior. Look, I know some of you might not be the biggest fans of this guy, but its power is undeniable. 140 attack with massive bulk. Sure, it might be a tad slow and can't take any type of hits from water or grass moves, but hey, you're only ending up in that situation if you're sending it out against a Pokemon that can demolish it, and you're not likely to do that, so I don't think it's really a concern in the grand scheme of things. Like many Pokemon across these best teams, you'll be getting Rhyhorn in the Crimson Mirelands, getting it up to level 42 to get yourself a Rhydon, and then immediately using a Protector that you found or purchased to evolve it into this behemoth. Much like the last two Pokemon, this thing has got a massively good move pool, so let's get into it. Similar to its last two appearances, Rhyperior is rocking high horsepower and Stone Edge for stab, but we'll be using two different coverage moves this time around in Mega Horn and Outrage. Not to sound like a broken record, of course you don't have to use these coverage moves. You can pick anything you want, which is truly the beauty of Legends Arceus. But at this point, with the coverage we've shown, with more still to come, these are here mostly for power. Mega Horn can definitely be useful against a grass type, if you've got no other choice but to face one with your Rhyperior. But it'll be far more useful against Psychic and Dark type Pokemon, and really just anything that doesn't resist the bug typing. Then of course Outrage will only put in super effective damage against other dragons, but that doesn't matter. 140 base attack on Rhyperior using a base 120 power move? Yeah, I don't want to be the Pokemon in the pathway of that. In conclusion, Rhyperior is an absolute monster, and is certainly one of the best members you could ask for on a team like this in my opinion. With that said, we've got two more members to go over, and neither of them are slouched by any means, so we've still got some excitement to be had today. So we've gone through the returning Pokemon from previous teams, which leaves us with a couple of new Pokemon to round out the squad. Back on the Typhlosion team, we introduced Crobat to the team, as a flying poison member. But this time, we're going with a ghost poison member. That's right, folks. You hear that typing and you just know. Gengar is showing up on the team today. We don't have to wait for no restriction teams for a Pokemon like Gengar to show up anymore, because you only need the link cable to evolve it now, instead of just trading. It's easy to get Ghastly in the Crimson Mirelands at night right when you arrive there. And there's even some Haunter floating around. Get that Haunter, evolve it into Gengar with the link cable, and it's confirmed. Gengar is here to kick some ass. It has 130 special attack and 110 speed, meaning it's going to often have a chance of moving twice in a row. And of course its move will pack a big punch. Let's move over to its moveset now, and see what this OG Ghost is offering us. Shadow Ball, Sludge Bomb, Dark Pulse, and Dazzling Gleam are the moves on Gengar's set today. Shadow Ball and Sludge Bomb are both stab, and exactly what you want on a Gengar. There's a ton covered by just those two moves, so the other two on this set are sort of up to you with what you want the extra coverage for. I went with Dazzling Gleam for the main piece of coverage, but of course if you want to add on Thunderbolt, Energy Ball, or even Icy Wind to get really weird, well, feel free. All of them can be viable. Alright, final Pokemon time. It's going to be the Great Ursaluna. Now, I know we've already got a ground type on the team. I will save the discourse about what the better ground type is for another video coming out this weekend. But I can say one thing, Ursaluna is the best normal type. And on a team that pretty much covered everything already, I couldn't help but pick a normal type. Ursaluna is a complicated Pokemon to get for some people. You need a Peat Block, and you'll have to wait for a full moon to evolve an Ursaring for this. You can get to Ursa's Ring, into the Crimson Mirelands, and grab Teddiursa or an Alpha Ursaring. And as I said, just sniff around for a Peat Block, and then wait for that full moon. Ursaluna has a powerful 140 base attack, so it's going to hit harder than anything else on the team. The exact power you want from a mop-up Pokemon like this. I think Ursaluna could have probably fit even better on the original best team. But of course, I wasn't 100% confident in everything at that point like I am now, weeks after the game's release. It's alright though, because Ursaluna is getting its rub here despite being annoying to get. Today's final moveset on our Ursaluna is Giga Impact, Headlong Rush, Thunder Punch, and Shadow Claw. Giga Impact, as far as I can tell, doesn't really take a recharge turn, so it's a massively strong normal type move. So you want to use it for sure, and Headlong Rush is another good stab move. This time for its ground typing. It lowers Ursaluna's defense, but that's not too big of a deal. It's worth it when you're probably doing a massive amount of damage. Then Thunder Punch is there for some coverage, since we didn't do too much with electric typing up to this point. And Shadow Claw is just backup for Gengar on a physical end. As you can see on screen though, Ursaluna has a bunch of great coverage moves, so you can switch in whatever best suits you at any one point in the game, since Ursaluna, as I said, is serving as the ultimate mop-up support. So that's the team, and once again, we have to go over what we can cover with this squad. Again, I'll start by going for the nobles. The first one you have to deal with is Cleaver, and with Cleaver, you can at least hit around with the flying type move from your Dartrix, and probably survive the battle. Then we move on to Lilligant. Your flying moves will be enough for that too, on top of any other coverage your team has. Arcanine isn't trying to deal with the Ursaluna or a Rhyhorn, so you know, easy time here. Electrode is just bodied by a fire type move, it's laughable. Finally, in your battle with Avalugg, it's going to be done in by any sort of special attacking fighting or steel move that you decide to go for. Don't overthink it, it isn't that hard knocking off this walking table. Let's not forget about the few trainer battles too. The simple battles, like the early ones, with Volo, the Rival, and Mai. They're easy, and we don't have to worry too much about naming off moves for them. The battle with Leon before dealing with Cleaver involves having to beat Gumi, which is still a little annoying no matter what you're bringing in to face him, but it'll be fine. You've got battles scattered across Hisui with the Misfortune Sisters, and for the first one, you'll be able to once again pull out your Kirlia to put down Coin's Toxicroak. Not long after, you'll need to beat the three of them in succession, and Gardevoir can pretty much handle all these battles herself. Pull out Psychic, Mystical Fire, and Ice Beam, and it's all but over. Their Pokemon wouldn't be able to handle the power. Ingo is a fun one, and it's another battle Gardevoir can pretty much handle on her own. Ice Beam and Psychic is all you'll really need to book your ride on the Subway of Victory. You'll have some run-ins with Adamant and Irida with their Ice Grass evolutions, but Fire-type moves are more than enough to handle them both. And Decidueye using fighting flying moves works as well. We move on now to the more challenging battles, starting with Benny. His team is Mismagius, Sneasler, Gardevoir, and Gallade. A combined effort by Gardevoir and Gengar should be enough to handle this Wally ancestor, which then leads us into Kamado. You're able to easily take on everything he has got. Gengar claps back Braviary and Clefable, and Decidueye can handle Golem and Snorlax. After you get through that battle, you deal with Palkia and Dialga, and getting through them is definitely not as difficult as it might sound. Rhyperior and Guardy are all you'll need for ground and fairy moves. Then we move on to the difficult and at times annoying Volo fight. Once again, it's just a near identical version of Cynthia's championship team, with the exception of Arcanine, which takes the place of Milotic, who isn't in the game. You'll want to turn to a trifecta of Gardevoir and Rhyperior for this one, of course. Togekiss gets taken down with an Ice move, Lucario can get bopped by Mystical Fire moves, and Arcanine is easy to overcome by Rhyperior, much like earlier in the game. Then, for Roseraiden's Spirit Tomb, you can use Guardy on her own, and for Garchomp too, of course. Then, once you overcome Volo, you must defeat Giratina twice, and it is difficult. It might look easy enough to just use Guardy on this thing, but it will hit you hard, and will take you out unless you're fully trained up values-wise. That's it for the battles though, after you overcome Volo and Giratina. Once again, I'm saying Gardevoir is the MVP of the team. A shout out to Ursaluna, since it's just such a jack of all trades with its power, that it can come through and do anything.